In the early morning hours of September 20th, 2017, thousands of lives in Puerto Rico were changed forever. One of the strongest storms to hit the island in 85 years, Hurricane Maria plummeted through communities with wind speeds of 155 miles per hour. People lost their homes, their businesses, electricity was off for months, and wading through floodwaters became the norm. 1 year later, we take a look at the resiliency of these communities and their fight to take back what Mother Nature stole from them in a WUFT special, Life After Maria.
Good evening, I'm Dolores Hinckley.
And I'm Sofia Millar. WUFT-TV traveled to Puerto Rico. While there, our reporters learned firsthand what folks on the island are doing to move forward and the challenges they still face.
Puerto Rico recently submitted a report to Congress stating it will take around $139 billion to fully recover from Hurricane Maria.
One of the most talked about difficulties were the widespread power outages. Hurricane Maria had damaged an already weak power grid. Nearly 11 months after the storm hit, Puerto Rican officials reported power had been restored. In El Yunque forest, some people are still without power. WUFT's Grace King begins our coverage tonight with a man who did everything he could to keep the lights on.
For 11 months and 19 days, generator after generator powered Jose Saldaña's business in El Yunque National Forest.
Entre todos los gastos de generadores, diésel, aceite, filtro de aire, filtro de diésel, filtro de aceite, yo me he gastado $60,000.
Tonti, as his friends and family call him, lost power when Hurricane Irma weakened Puerto Rico's power grid in early September of last year. So when Maria barreled across the island just a few weeks later, Tonti realized his power wasn't coming back soon and that he needed to adjust to life without electricity.
Esta es mi luz de noche. La pongo a cargar por el día para en la noche tener luz.
According to a report from the government of Puerto Rico, 100% of electric customers lost power.
The power was off almost 10 months.
179 días.
And more than 25% of the island's decaying transmission line towers and poles were damaged, further delaying restoration efforts. The financial burden of keeping Tonti's business alive with only generators.
Entonces, los ahorros de mi vejez los he tenido que gastar.
Will take him years to recover from.
Que eso han sido parte del retiro que yo tenía para retirarme, pues ahora tengo que seguir trabajando porque nadie me da un incentivo de todo lo que yo he gastado.
A year later, Tonti's power is finally back on. Electricity is restored across the island, and a $22 billion plan is in the works to keep the lights on.
El gobernador de Puerto Rico está trabajando ahora para que de todo proyecto de ahora en adelante sea un proyecto resistente para que en un futuro, 2020, 2022, 2024, el sistema energético en Puerto Rico no sea tan vulnerable y sea mucho más resistente a lo que son los huracanes.
There needs to be an investment in that, but a lot of money is coming to Puerto Rico, and we are committed to investing in that effort.
An investment that will develop a more reliable power grid, creating a bright future from a dark past. Those 11 months following Hurricane Maria, Tonti hopes to never relive again.
No he tenido ayuda de nadie.
Grace King, WUFT News.
It took nearly a year for official death toll numbers to surface. Puerto Rico upped the toll after an independent report by George Washington University. The report estimates 2,975 deaths. That number far exceeds Puerto Rico's government original report of 64. Now, the big question, are they prepared if another storm were to hit?
The director of the State Emergency Management Agency of Puerto Rico, Carlos Acevedo, says Puerto Rico was not prepared for Maria.
El huracán María es el desastre más grande que ha ocurrido dentro de todos los Estados Unidos. Y Puerto Rico estaba preparado, los planes que habían en Puerto Rico hechos eran para que poder afrontar situaciones de emergencia de un huracán categoría 1, tal vez un categoría 2.
The director says the emergency plans had to be redone. No watt radios are being installed, which are radios that connect antenna to antenna and do not go through a repeater. Acevedo also says food and water have been distributed to the 78 municipalities in the island in case a hurricane hits them this hurricane season.
It's been a long road to recovery, especially in hard-hit areas like Utuado.
Noticias WUFT reporter Alexis Howard joins us now with how some families lost everything they had.
Sophia and Dolores, a lot of the people in the mountains were left with nothing after the storm. And now, 1 year later, many have begun rebuilding from the ground up. But for others, their day-to-day lives are far from going back to normal.
Yo creía que no venía para acá. Yo creía que no iba a pasar como lo que pasó, no creía.
Modesto Viruet was one of the dozens who lost it all when Hurricane Maria tore through the mountains of Utuado, Puerto Rico, the hardest hit town on the island. Modesto stayed in the small basement of his home with his wife until the storm passed. What he found when he was finally able to get out was complete destruction.
La casita se la llevó, la casa mía. Se llevó esta, se llevó aquella. La única que me dejó fue la del otro hijo mío, que ahí que estoy yo.
Modesto now lives in a small home with his son and family, which is still under construction. Like Modesto, much of Utuado is still in need of attention, but the needs of many goes far beyond the physical.
Casi a un año del huracán, nosotros estamos observando que la necesidad es más que de cosas tangibles, es emocional.
Gabriel Molina Medina, a farmer in the mountains of Utuado, is one with his own traumas. Gabriel lost it all during the hurricane, but faced an even greater adversity. He was diagnosed with throat cancer in the midst of the storm and had to undergo emergency surgery.
La operación le afectó el área de la garganta, que se puede ver visualmente. Él siempre utiliza el pañuelo porque como es agricultor, él brega con animales, gallinas, perros, cerdos, en esa condición.
Gabriel is unable to verbally communicate with others, a detriment for someone who was always very happy and sociable. However, he is hopeful that he will obtain the help he needs.
Él es una persona joven y su deseo es seguir hacia adelante y con deseos de vida.
This resilience is evident in many of the people of Utuado and the rest of the island.
Las cosas del Señor son grandes.
Al final, este libro todavía no se ha cerrado. La última página todavía no está escrita. Y yo sé lo que dice la última página ya. Nosotros vencimos. Nosotros estaremos bien.
An end that can only be achieved with the hope and faith of a people who can overcome anything despite the obstacles of life.
2 weeks after visiting Puerto Rico, we were told Gabriel is now receiving the help he needs.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is still under fire for its response to the disaster. In a recent report, the U.S. Government Accountability Office criticized FEMA's efforts, stating they had a slow response. GAO's Emergency Management Director, Christopher Curry, says FEMA was already stretched thin after dealing with 2 prior hurricanes and wildfires. FEMA says it has already issued recommendations for improvements. The agency is still receiving criticisms for denying many Puerto Ricans applications for housing assistance. Fear struck many of the families on the island as floodwaters began to rise during the storm.
WUFT's Grace King talked to a family who are on the verge of drowning in their Toa Baja home.
Maria Gonzalez watched Hurricane Maria tear across Puerto Rico from her mother's window. They lost power and thought the worst was over. Then,
y como al mediodía, yo estoy cocinando y de momento salen gritando, agua, agua. Y cuando miramos ya el agua no llegaba a la rodilla.
El agua llegó aproximadamente como 6 o 7 pies dentro de esta casa.
torrential rain from the hurricane forced government officials to open the floodgates of La Plata Lake Dam in Toa Alta.
Soltaron las represas, abrieron todas las compuertas por miedo a que se rompieran, entonces iba a ser una catástrofe. Abrieron las represas y toda esa agua vino a pasar aquí. Nosotros no sabíamos nada de eso, nosotros no teníamos comunicación, no había celulares, no había radio, no había televisión.
So when the water began rising without warning,
el sistema de comunicaciones en Puerto Rico colapsó un 100%. Ningún municipio tenía comunicación.
Residents panicked.
Everybody tried to get out of it. It's like they didn't tell us on time. Because if they would have told us on time, we would have get out of here.
Maria worried her bedridden mother might drown, but family members like her cousin Javier and other neighbors stepped in to help.
Una casa aquí atrás, que es de alto. El muchacho es muy buena gente. Dijo, venga, hacen para acá, llevamos a mami. Entre todos y soltaron la cama y nos la llevamos.
Maria and Victor spent the night at their neighbors, uncertain if their son had survived the flooding.
Cuando él llegó ahí, que yo lo vi, y nos tiramos a llorar. Él decía, mami, yo lloraba por la noche pensando en ustedes.
Though thankful they still had each other, the rising water took everything else. All their possessions destroyed.
Pasamos 2 noches sentados en una silla. 2 noches que no podíamos dormir porque en la casa donde nos quedamos no había cama, no estaba preparado para eso, no había ni baño.
Maria and Victor got help from friends, family, and FEMA to help rebuild and replace, but nothing is the same.
Bien bonito. De la muñeca esa Sofía.
Fear of another flood still lingers in their minds.
You know how many people almost drowned? And how many people, I know how many people died? You know, we saw it over here. And we lived that, you know. I cried like for months.
Tears that have turned into a plan of action.
Lo que sí te puedo asegurar es que si en cuanto anuncian un huracán, yo no me voy a quedar aquí. La vida mía, otra vez como pasó esta vez, no la voy a arriesgar ni por nada del mundo.
Grace King, WUFT News.
Despite it being a year after Maria, blue tarps are still very common on the island. Many people in Puerto Rico lack a roof over their homes. Governor Ricardo Rosselló says he's working with his team to solve this problem.
We still have about 60,000 people that don't have rooftops, and that's just no way to live. My expectation is that we should be getting the drawdowns for the CDBG funding, which is $1.5 billion. About 70% of that goes to housing needs. So hopefully where other efforts have failed, getting access to this funding can enable us to rebuild quickly those homes.
Several people on the island may never get the help they need.
Noticias WUFT's Claudia Perez Brito tells us why the lack of property titles are to blame.
La noche, eso no se puede describir. Mira, que me da hasta frío todavía.
Pablo Soto's small home is nestled between 2 valleys in the mountains of Yabucoa, the city where the eye of Hurricane Maria made landfall.
It was precisely in this very room where Pablo Soto and his wife found refuge during Hurricane Maria.
No era fácil. Todo por todos lados baratado. No quedaba nada más que ese esqueleto.
And almost a year later, Soto still has a blue tarp over part of his roof.
Pues la ayudita que me dio FEMA, pues como les dije, no me da. Tengo que tumbar la casa completa. Apelé. No cualifiqué porque yo no tengo escritura de esto aquí. Porque esto era de mi abuelo, pero mi abuelo nunca tuvo escritura.
Soto not having a property title to his home is an impediment thousands of Puerto Ricans have faced following the hurricane. Many people inherited homes from family members who had no property title to begin with, which is a requirement by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, known as FEMA, in order to assist in rebuilding their homes. Soto is not alone in feeling like he has received little to no help. Carmen Cruz Gonzalez is 81 and was alone the night of the hurricane.
Bueno, ahí está la nena, ahí está, se me dañó la nevera, la estufa, ya la cogimos.
Gonzalez spent 5 months without electricity following the storm, and she continues to wait for her home's final repairs to be completed, while Soto is still waiting for a proper roof. In the meantime, he and his wife are renting a neighboring home.
No es fácil. La mujer lo único que me dice, bueno, pa, si viene otro huracán, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Y yo, si viene otro huracán, nos quedamos aquí. Mientras se pueda, pagamos la renta de la casa. Y allá abajo. Pues allá abajo lo que el otro dejó, pues se lo llevará. Pues yo no puedo hacer más nada.
Claudia Perez Brito, WUFT News.
For those who were denied federal government assistance, help came in another way. Grace King tells us how a nonprofit organization stepped in to help one of their own.
A work in progress 11 months after the storm.
Está todo caído.
Maria's high winds took nearly everything from Gregoria Delgado.
Lo único que pude sacar fue la estufa y la lavadora. La nevera se dañó, el juego comedor se rompió, que todavía los cristales están por ahí. y los muebles se dañaron porque eran de tela.
She lives by herself in the mountains of Trujillo Alto.
Y según lloré la noche de María, así lloraba todos los días, todos los días.
Crying because she thought she couldn't get help.
Que nosotros no tenemos escritura de esto aquí. Esto no tiene escritura, aquí no hay de nadie.
She's not alone. The Puerto Rico Builders Association estimates hundreds of thousands of Puerto Ricans don't have proper documentation for their homes. That makes federal assistance nearly impossible to get.
We don't have all of the properties fully registered, and therefore we don't have visibility towards them. So we're getting funding now to help identify those areas and to help them get their title.
Delgado is considered lucky. She got a couple $1,000s from FEMA anyway. Plus,
Doña Goya, como estaba con urgencia, una casa nos cancelaron en un lugar porque habían unos problemas. Entonces decidimos darle esa oportunidad a ella para que resolviera, se da cuenta. Nosotros llevamos aquí casi 2 semanas y pico.
a church group is helping rebuild her home for free.
Gracias a Dios aparecieron ellos y ya me tienen casi y de volver a mudarme a mi casa.
Others aren't as fortunate.
Hay mucha gente que tiene necesidad, hay unos problemas emocionales. El número 1 es que se te llevó la casa y número 2 es que estás solo. Es difícil.
The last 11 months have indeed been hard for Delgado, but she says she's managed to survive because of her belief in God.
Es todo lo que le pido a Dios, que pueda salir bien y que pueda regresar otro viaje de nuevo a mi casa, con salud.
Grace King, WUFT News.
Up next, WUFT sits down with the governor of Puerto Rico.
I assume responsibility to make sure that all of the needs of the people of Puerto Rico are met.
Plus, this business owner's daily struggle to choose whether to eat or pay the bills.